We'll start now. All right, welcome everyone to the July meeting of the Cable Television Advisory Board. I don't see any members of the public present. And, well, we don't have, I don't think we've got a quorum. So we'll move on. Mr. Painter, do you have some reports for us?
I do. All right, our current balance of the operating account 2505 is $697.69. Our expenses for June, excuse me, including salaries and facility operations, totaled $21,630.81. Excuse me, we had 1,131 cable cast total in June, and of this, 28 were live events, and this breaks down to Education 99, 14, and Government 14. We had 1,079 playbacks, and this breaks down to Public 96, 584, Education 99, 274, and Government 16, 221. Pete is not, he's at the Alliance for Community Media Conference in Baltimore, so I'll read his accomplishments on Channel 99. On the June 1st, they provided live coverage for the Silver Knights home opener at Holman. On the 2nd, Bishop Girton graduation ceremonies at Bishop Girton. They also, on the 5th, live coverage of the Silver Knights Education Day game. On the 6th, they had the BG Bedford girls state final at Memorial High School. Excuse me. On the 7th, they recorded Dr. Crisp Elementary Almost Summer Concert. On the 9th, they recorded the BG Pinkerton Boys State Final at Exeter High School. And on the 13th, they presented the live Silver Knights baseball at Holman Stadium. 14th, recorded the Nobel Award presentation at Nashua South. On the 14th, they also recorded the Nashua Adult School graduation at the North Auditorium. On the 17th, they recorded the Nashua North and South graduations. Excuse me. On the 21st, the Silver Knights baseball at Holman Stadium. 23rd, recorded the Comic Fest at Nashua Public Library. The 25th, they recorded the Silver Knights baseball at Holman Stadium. And on the 28th, they recorded the Nashua Library Summer Concert featuring Pete Kilpatrick. And I've handed out the Access Nashua report for this month, so I won't read that. And I also sent everybody a hard copy on their emails this morning.
All right, any questions? Mr. Leaches.
Mr. Payne, do you know, are there any plans to tape the Holman Stadium 80th anniversary celebration Tuesday night?
Absolutely, we're going to be there all day. Okay. And we're also doing a, what do they call it, a live show at 12 noon today concerning the players. I'm not sure of the details because Access Nashua is doing that. I'm going to be helping them set up. But it does go live on 96, excuse me, 96 at noon.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? If not, Mr. Leaches, do you have anything for us?
No, we've taken the summer off. We'll be resuming our meetings in September, and we'll be looking at gearing up for the back-to-school information. They'll run the generic slides for each of the schools in Nashua with information about hours, the principal, and those types of things as we've done in the past.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Painter?
Just going to say Tuesday might be just in time for the next heat wave for over at Holman Stadium.
Of course.
It's going to be quite warm, yeah.
If I could, I will mention the Nashua Goes Back to School event at the public library is coming up in August, and that will be on August the 23rd. And that's a great event. Kids get their backpacks, get to meet their teachers, and I know that the library does a great job in accommodating that event, and Alderwoman Malizi Golja and June Karen are once again involved in coordinating the events for that day.
All right, thank you. All right, in the interest of not having this be the shortest meeting ever, Mr. Painter, perhaps you could just refresh everyone's memory as far as how, if people are having issues with their Comcast, specifically the things that are related to the city's role, either if they have concerns about the quality of the service, or perhaps you could talk a little bit about your work on that.
Well, it hasn't happened in quite a while, but, you know, on the website, we have a place for that, that you can, you know, if you're having some kind of an issue with Comcast. Now, of course, Comcast sends us any correspondence that they get concerning service that, you know, I mean, not everything, but that would concern us. And then we would answer that, and that's when I would go to Brian Christensen, and he is very good at replying to that.
Okay.
And taking care of that.
But that's usually after people have tried Comcast first directly,
Yeah.
because that's
Yes.
should be the most efficient way. Sometimes not
Yeah.
necessarily, but
And
All right.
on the stations too, of course, we run slides that give our telephone, if anybody's having an issue right there, you know, that to call us, and then we will get in touch with, and I put a ticket into Comcast. We don't have that very often. It hasn't happened in quite a while. But that is one way, and also on the website, it says it as well, gives a number to call, and we put in a report to Comcast.
all right, thank you. Let's see. Even though we don't have a quorum, we should do roll call so that we know who has shown up. Andrew Sonoda is here. Dorothy Clark. Bruce Cottignone. Richard Ferenkopf. Stephen
Brian Rhodes.
Brian Rhodes, yes. Brian Garrity.
Here.
Ken Gidge. Sally Hyland. Ernest Jetty.
Here.
Ed Lecious.
Here.
Jennifer McCormick.
Here.
All right. The end of the list there was showing up strong. All right. Since we didn't have a quorum, I don't think we actually need a motion to adjourn, but,
Before we adjourn.
oh, sure.
So regarding Comcast, I think there's a misunderstanding. I don't know if I understand this correctly myself, but as I understand it, Comcast does not have a monopoly on providing cable service. The city has, I think, issues them a franchise that enables them to provide the cable service, but any other company is free to come in and compete with Comcast. Am I correct about that?
Yes, my understanding is that, from working on this over the years, the city is the franchise authority, which basically franchise is a contract governed by FCC statute that gives local authority the ability to grant use of public right-of-ways for cable providers. Under the terms of that regime, the city has to give that grant of use of the right-of-ways, but it's not exclusive to that one provider. There's nothing that says it has to be a single provider. There is, however, a sort of most favored nation status clause to the treaty, to the contract, which means that the franchise agreement that's given to Comcast, the other later entering providers can't get a better deal than Comcast did. So if other providers came into the city and wanted the same deal that we gave Comcast, not that there was much dealing on the city's part, because there's not that much that the city has authority to stipulate under the contract. But that, yes, other providers can come in. The barrier to entry for most new providers coming into the city is really more of a financial and infrastructure limitation. Comcast owns the Comcast cables and infrastructure that's provided to the city, their build-out. A new provider would either need to buy that from Comcast, which is unlikely unless Comcast wants to leave the city, or they'd have to build their own, which is a very expensive undertaking. So that's where sort of a practical monopoly is in place for Comcast because they own the system that they're using.
We are, however, one of the few communities that is bordered by another provider. For example, what is now Spectrum Communications, which used to be Time Warner Charter, borders us in Hollis. So from a logistical standpoint, the physical plant could be extended into Nashua. Now, in certain markets, as I've shared with Mr. Sonoda, in the city of Rochester, New Hampshire, that is a city that is primarily a MetroCast system. MetroCast has the franchise agreement, for example. But being bordered by towns such as Dover, Somersworth, Comcast had plant in those towns, and they were able to extend their plant out into the city of Rochester. So I believe Rochester is the first in the state of Nashua to have two actual competing cable companies in the same town. The build-out now is being undertaken, and I believe by September, they'll have an option of using either MetroCast or Comcast, but that's the first we've seen of that type of thing.
Is that, so in other words, they're running their own cables, but their head end is already there? I mean, is that?
Without getting too technical, it's their physical wiring is able to be extended out from those bordering cities. So without knowing enough about it myself, you could say that we have a bordering city in Hollis, New Hampshire, where there's probably a possibility that plant could be extended if a company like Spectrum wanted to get into a market such as Nashua. But to Andrew's point, you know, they would have to abide by the same franchise agreement that Comcast is already abiding by.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Ms. Highland.
Just a quick question about that. Why isn't there either requirement or an opportunity for two companies to share the lines? Why does there have to be a monopoly, other than the fact that they built it? But why isn't there, it's PUC regulated, right?
I don't believe it
Actually,
is.
it's FCC,
It's FCC.
federal.
And then why is there not the opportunity to share those lines?
So
Well,
the
they're-
lines themselves are the physical property of the provider. Those lines don't exist until the provider installs them.
But somebody gives them permission to put those lines in, right?
Correct.
On probably city-owned property?
Correct.
That's
Right.
what the franchise agreement is. It's a grant of them to use the public right-of-ways.
So that right actually exists to any provider that wants to come in and do it. It's just that the other
To have
providers-
sole use of those wires, though? Obviously, they spend the money
Yes,
to put,
the wires, they have sole use of them because the wires are their property. The right-of-way is what the franchise agreement provides them, and that right-of-way technically is provided to anyone out there that's willing to run their own wires.
so in Rochester, for instance, the second company came in and put their own wires next to the other wires?
That is
Yes.
correct.
And that's why the
Wouldn't it, am I correct in thinking that if they did use a one cable too, it would split the bandwidth? I mean, you can only get so
You're
much.
talking about two independent plants that have nothing to do with each other, so.
No, but I mean, if they were, say they were sharing a cable, that cable would only have so much,
So
I
much
mean, it would have to be
capacity, yes,
split
that-
between
so-
the two. I mean, that was the thing. I was always my understanding that somebody would have to run their own wires too, just to have the capacity.
You're saying hypothetically, if we
Yeah.
had control of the wires and wanted to split them to two providers, yes, it would also severely detriment. It would deteriorate the signal if you tried to have two separate providers running on the same wire, so to speak.
Yeah, because only half would go to one and half would go to the other. So you wouldn't get the full capacity of what's now available on the cable.
And I think there's also a legal matter that if you tried to force a company to let a competitive company use their private property, you'd have a takings issue, and you'd have to compensate them for the cost of the property that you were taking.
And yet, that's what's happening in the electric industry, right? Where the wires are owned by one company, a distribution company, and other companies are providing electricity through that system. Other generators are providing,
I think if you look into that, I think they're actually paying for the use of those
right,
distribution wires.
right, so that there's not a duplication, right.
You are talking about two very different technologies, though.
Okay,
Sending an electrical service through a particular line, these other providers that you're referencing, they do pay a rental fee to use
Right,
that wire
right.
to the electrical company.
sure,
The same technology would not apply in the telecommunications industry because you're not talking about the same signals. You're not talking about the same type of in and out, so to speak.
each company has its own signal, is that it?
They have to have their own infrastructure that will provide the service that on a national scale they commit to providing to their customers.
That's the physical, that's a physical wire.
That
What about what goes over the wire? That has to be different for each company? I guess I don't understand as much,
What goes over the wire, that signal, for lack of a better term,
right?
is, number one, proprietary to each and every company.
Okay,
But the actual physical technology itself, it works in different ways. You know, you have a company like Spectrum, for example. The end user device, that modem that's in your house, that cable box that's in your house, they could be provided by any number of cable box providers or modem providers, and they may not very well be compatible with, you know, the same type of devices that are used in a Comcast system. So it's not as one-for-one interchangeable as you might be thinking.
so we can't anticipate that in this industry, we would see the deregulation that has been rampant in the electric industry. Is that what you're saying?
I think what people are looking for is a true competitive market, and in order for that to happen, or the only way I think it's going to happen is if companies like DirecTV, if they get their wireless product on par so that it's truly competitive with a Comcast, for example. Now, their video product is certainly competitive. It really, where I think they have a struggle is that their internet service provider is not a true competitor with Comcast, and that's something that they're lacking. So through wireless technologies, I think that will create a more competitive market, or you would need an environment like we just discussed, where a company like Spectrum would come in and say, yes, we can run our plant from our existing plant in Hollis, and it's worth it to do so because Nashua is such a large market, so we'd like to get a decent-sized share of that, but they would have to invest the physical infrastructure in order to make that happen.
I see. Thanks very much. It's interesting. Thank you.
Alderman?
Yeah, to follow up, right now, am I correct that right now that there are companies that are competing with Comcast in Nashua for internet service? Like you can get internet service through Consolidated, or I don't know if Verizon still is providing
It's
that.
Verizon was purchased. Their infrastructure was purchased by Fairpoint. So the service is being provided through Fairpoint.
And now Consolidated.
Yeah.
right?
Right, yeah, name change there, right.
So as far as, as I understand it, the cable business is kind of on the downswing, that a lot of people are not watching television through cable, they're watching it through their internet service. And right now, there are at least two, I don't know if there are more, but there's at least Comcast and Consolidated who are providing internet service in Nashua. Am I right about that?
Well, yes, technically you're right. If I remember, and I'm speaking from only my own personal memory now, but there was originally at one point there was a deal on the table where Verizon was going to purchase Fairpoint in Nashua, and the idea behind that was that they were going to put in an infrastructure similar to what we just talked about with Spectrum, because it was going to be a good investment for them. And that would have been another similar true competitive environment, so to speak. But for reasons that I don't pretend to understand, they did not want to do that infrastructure, and that's why the sale didn't go through.
A slight correction to that. I think what you're referring to is before Fairpoint acquired the telephone, and as part of that, the fiber optic system that Verizon had built out, Verizon was looking at providing television service through the fiber optic to the house network that they were building. And Nashua was one of the initial cities in the state where that network was being built. So some parts of Nashua have the fiber optic system that was built by Verizon and then was acquired by Fairpoint and then now consolidated. So that's where that internet service is being provided. Verizon didn't want to have to deal with each city and town for a franchise agreement to provide television service. They wanted to be able to do it on either a statewide level or not to have to deal with it at all. So that was part of their impetus in selling their operations in New Hampshire, and I think also Maine at the same time, to Fairpoint, which then gave us the subsequent name changes.
But Fairpoint then in turn didn't continue to expand their fiber optic.
Right. Fairpoint had financial problems and couldn't expand that network any further, so it basically stayed the way it was, built by Verizon before they left. Mr. Leicius?
In fact, some portions of South Nashua actually got completed, and residents in those homes, they were test homes, actually had FiOS during that period of time. Now, if you go to FiOS now, you end up getting re-referred through them to Dish TV for computer service, or for cable service, rather. So it's out there, but it comes in through a third vendor, if you will. And in some areas, the dishes don't work.
Right. I think in order to try and answer the question I think you're asking, is there a competitive internet provider? Across the board for all spectrum of all customers, ones that aren't surrounded by pine trees or ones that want a business application. In that sense, I don't think they have a true competitor. Whether it's they can't provide the speed, they can't provide the size of the service, or they can't always provide. So there are companies that can provide some internet service, but truly competitive companies, no, I don't believe that exists.
And just another follow-up, and for people who, like our cable TV, that Nashua produces, you don't need to look at channel 16 or 96 or 99. You can get that through your computer, can't you?
Through the computer, correct. You can go to the website, and there's a live stream there.
So if you have internet service, however you get that, whether it's Comcast or somebody else, you can still get the city produced TV. You don't have to have Comcast cable to do that.
I would note that the funding for that city-produced TV does come from the franchise agreement. And if you're, and that franchise fee is only on the television part of your cable bill. So if you're using just internet, you're actually not paying to that, to fund that television production. So
So if too many people switch from cable, then we won't have the money to,
We'll be coming to see the Board of Aldermen.
That's our
Yeah.
biggest, that is our biggest fear, as far as that, everybody switches
Comcast
over.
were to say, you know, sign up for internet and telephone and we'll give you cable service for free, the funding literally goes to zero.
Boom, yep.
The funding, and this is not something that we can change, this is the franchise agreement itself, which is-
actually, it's the FCC
FCC.
statutes and regulations that govern this. The franchise relates only to television. So, again, if people are having problems with their Comcast internet, we're happy to pass your concerns along, but strictly speaking, this board and the city doesn't have any influence on that.
I mean,
thank you.
that is our biggest fear, that everybody goes to internet and doesn't watch the cable, but, you know, because the way it's written. So that is, but we provide that service, I mean, meaning, and also even on Roku, if you have Roku at your house, you can get us through that. And that's just, you know, we subscribe to that, so like where I am, I'm not in Nashua. And on the Roku, I've got it set up for.
Jeff, you might want to lean closer to the
Oh, I'm
mic.
sorry, I'm guilty of that, huh? Yeah, you know, where I live, we don't have it, this Comcast, so I use Roku my Roku to get, I have it programmed so I can see our channels. So
Ms. Highland?
I'm guilty of that.
Just a reminder, the city provides the right-of-way, and there has to be some legal connection there that would provide some recourse, I would assume, if we get to a point where there is a problem in terms of not being financed. I would assume that's part of the agreement, that because we provide the right-of-way.
One thing that's going on where Pete is down in the Alliance for Community Media National Conference right now in Baltimore, and that's one of the big subjects, is trying to rewrite the Cable Act. That, you know, it would be written in such a way that funding would come from the internet. In other words, the way it's written now, no. It's strictly television. So they're trying to go about it that way, to you know, catch up with the technology of it, but I don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. But that is one of the big subjects they've got going down in that conference now. So we'll see.
So, and without getting too much into it, I think that federal law would preempt whatever we were trying to do that. So
Yeah.
that's why the federal law needs to be changed to accommodate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or discussion about this, or?
On another topic, I was just looking at the minutes from last meeting. I'm a little disappointed Pete's not here, and I don't see the drone, so I guess we're not going to get a demonstration from what they learned at drone school.
Next month, we'll do that.
All right.
You know, we still have to
But
take
that was
our-
an interesting experience
Oh, it was a
and
wonderful
helpful.
experience, yeah. You know, it really took away the intimidation of it. I mean, whereas they just, God, we were 6-7 hours a day doing, you know, flying these drones and just getting used to it. I mean, because they are so well advanced now that, I mean, they are 100% controllable. You know, I mean, all the drones that I've had, that I've gotten for, you know, Gabe, my son, you know, they fly and crash into trees and things. These things see everything. So, I mean, they're just totally controllable, you know. The one thing we do have to do, though, Pete and I have to take this Part 107, it's called. Like, we passed the pilot certification, but the FAA has this whole Part 107, which is all technical, how to read maps, so we have to know how to read maps and all. So we were taught that, but we haven't taken that exam yet. That's coming up. So hopefully we'll have that by August. You know, that's the other half. That's the technical half of it.
All right. Again, actually, with 6 people, I think we have a quorum. So, is there a motion?
Move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. See everyone next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.